Out of the 34,000 American soldiers who landed at Omaha Beach on D-Day, over 30,000 became casualties within the first few hours. They had a life expectancy of just 8 minutes on that blood-soaked sand, but Omaha was called both the most crucial and at the same time the most suicidal landing zone of the entire invasion. Their story is far more horrific than most people realize, and now you're going to see why. When people talk about D-Day, they usually picture heroic charges and rapid victories. But Omaha Beach was a completely different kind of nightmare. This 5-mile stretch of Norman coastline between Vierville and Colville became the deadliest killing field in American military history. The beach itself was a natural fortress, with 100-foot bluffs rising behind a narrow strip of sand and shingle. But in June 1944, that seemingly peaceful French coastline held the key to liberating Western Europe. The Americans needed Omaha because it connected the British landings at Gold Beach with the isolated American forces at Utah Beach. Without securing this central position, the entire invasion could be split in half and destroyed piecemeal. Allied planners knew Omaha would be tough, but they had no idea just how tough. The Germans had spent 4 years turning those bluffs into an impregnable wall of concrete, steel, and death. German Field Marshal Rommel personally inspected Omaha's defenses in early 1944. He wasn't satisfied with what he found, so he ordered massive improvements. What the Americans didn't know was that they were about to assault the most heavily fortified beach in Hitler's Atlantic Wall. The Germans had 12 major concrete bunkers, 35 pillboxes, 18 anti-tank gun positions, and 85 machine gun nests, all zeroed in on the beach. Artillery positions on the bluffs could hit any spot on the sand with devastating accuracy. To understand why landing at Omaha was such a nightmare, we need to look at what American soldiers actually faced when those landing craft doors dropped. The Higgins boats carried 36 men each, packed shoulder to shoulder in a steel box that offered no protection once the ramp went down. These boats were designed for speed and capacity, not survival. They measured 36 feet long, weighed 18,000 pounds fully loaded, and could reach 12 knots in calm water. But here's the thing, your boat had to get within 50 yards of the beach before dropping that ramp. The coxswain would gun the engine straight toward shore, while German machine guns, mortars, and artillery concentrated everything they had on your boat. You had maybe 30 seconds from the time the Germans spotted you until you hit the beach. That meant 30 seconds of being a sitting duck in a metal coffin. The MG-42 machine guns alone could fire 200 rounds per minute. Just one of those guns could put a bullet in every square foot of beach space in under a minute. The Germans had positioned them to create overlapping fields of fire with no dead zones. Even if you survived the landing, you faced 200 yards of open beach with absolutely no cover, except the bodies of men who landed before you. Weather made everything worse. The seas were running 6 to 8 feet, which meant seasick soldiers were vomiting in their helmets before they even reached the killing zone. Many landing craft missed their designated sectors entirely, dumping men in the wrong locations where they had no idea where they were or what their objectives should be. Some boats swamped in the heavy seas, drowning soldiers before they ever saw the beach. What happened next defies everything military planners thought they knew about amphibious warfare. At 0630 hours on June 6, 1944, the first wave of landing craft approached Omaha Beach. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. The preliminary bombardment had been too short and too scattered to suppress the German defenses. Most shells overshot their targets and landed harmlessly inland. D.D. Sherman tanks that were supposed to provide fire support sank in the rough seas before reaching shore. Out of 32 amphibious tanks launched, only 2 made it to the beach. The men who needed that armor support found themselves naked and alone on the sand. As the first boats hit the beach, German gunners who had been waiting patiently in their concrete bunkers opened fire. The result was immediate and devastating. Men were cut down the moment they stepped off the landing craft. Some units lost 90% of their strength in the first few minutes. The 116th Infantry Regiment's Company A landed directly in front of the strongest German positions. Within 10 minutes, 96% of the company was dead or wounded. Only 3 men out of the entire unit remained combat effective. Private First Class Gilbert Murdoch was in the first boat to hit Dog Green sector. Years later, he described stepping off that landing craft as walking into a buzzsaw. Machine gun bullets were hitting the water around him like hail, and mortar shells were exploding every few seconds. He watched his squad leader's head disappear in a pink mist, just 3 steps onto the beach. Murdoch somehow made it to the base of the seawall, but found himself pinned down with a handful of other survivors. They couldn't move forward because of the machine guns. They couldn't retreat because more boats were landing behind them. For 6 hours, they lay pressed against that wall, while bullets whined overhead and artillery shells walked back and forth across the beach. What made Murdoch's survival even more incredible was that he'd been hit 3 times, once in the shoulder, once in the leg, and once in the helmet that saved his skull. He used a dead sergeant's body as a shield while he tried to stop his own bleeding. Around noon, when tanks finally made it to the beach, Murdoch was one of only 7 men from his entire company still alive and able to fight. But this wasn't the only story of impossible survival against overwhelming odds. Staff Sergeant Robert Slaughter landed with the 116th Infantry in the second wave. His boat, Coxswain, was shot through the head just as they approached the beach, and the boat started circling in the surf zone. German gunners used it for target practice, killing or wounding 15 of the 30 men aboard before they even reached shore. When Slaughter finally made it to the beach, he found himself in the middle of what he later called organized chaos. Dead and wounded men were scattered everywhere. Equipment was floating in the surf. Landing craft were burning. The noise was incredible. A constant roar of machine guns, artillery, and men screaming for medics who couldn't reach them. Slaughter crawled forward using dead bodies as cover. He watched a lieutenant stand up to rally the men and get cut in half by machine gun fire. A medic trying to reach wounded soldiers was blown apart by a mortar round. For hours, Slaughter moved forward 1 bloody yard at a time, following a sergeant who seemed to know where he was going. By mid-afternoon, small groups of survivors had somehow fought their way off the beach and were attacking German positions from behind. Slaughter found himself with a mixed group of rangers, engineers, and riflemen assaulting a concrete bunker. They had no heavy weapons, just rifles, grenades, and pure desperation. But if you think those stories were incredible, wait until you hear about Captain John Rain of the 5th Ranger Battalion. Rain's landing craft hit a sandbar 100 yards from shore in chest-deep water. As the ramp dropped, machine gun fire immediately killed the first 3 men in line. Ron dove over the side and found himself swimming toward shore in full combat gear, while bullets churned the water around him. A mortar round exploded so close it lifted him completely out of the water, but somehow didn't kill him. Rain made it to the beach with a dislocated shoulder and shrapnel wounds in both legs. He found 12 other Rangers hiding behind a burned-out landing craft. That was all that remained of his 40-man company. For the next 4 hours, this tiny group of Rangers did what entire battalions hadn't been able to do. They worked their way up the bluffs using grappling hooks and ropes, while German machine gunners tried to pick them off. Rain led charge after charge against concrete bunkers, using nothing but grenades and automatic rifles. By evening, Rain's dozen Rangers had knocked out 3 major German positions and opened a gap that allowed hundreds of other soldiers to finally move inland. When reinforcements reached them at sunset, they found Rain still fighting, despite being wounded 4 more times during the day. Of his original company, only 8 men remained alive and unwounded. Against all odds, by midnight on June 6th, American forces had secured a foothold on Omaha Beach, but the cost was staggering. Official casualty reports list around 400 American dead and wounded on Omaha Beach alone. That number doesn't include the hundreds who drowned in landing craft that never made it to shore, or men who were listed as missing and never found. The 89% casualty rate among first-wave units at Omaha Beach remains the highest loss rate for any successful amphibious assault in modern warfare. Some companies were completely wiped out, others lost every officer and most of their sergeants. Entire boat teams simply vanished, leaving only bloodstains on the sand to mark where they'd landed. What made Omaha Beach so deadly wasn't just German firepower, though that was devastating enough. It was the combination of perfect German defensive positioning, failed American planning, bad weather, and equipment failures that all came together on the same morning. The preliminary bombardment missed. The tanks sank. The landing craft hit the wrong beaches. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Yet somehow, through individual acts of courage that defied all military logic, American soldiers fought their way off that killing ground and established a beachhead that would eventually liberate Europe. The men who survived Omaha Beach had endured something that military historians still struggle to explain. How do you fight when 90% of your unit is gone? How do you advance when every step forward means certain death? The answer lies in the individual stories of men like Murdoch, Slaughter, and Rain. They didn't survive because of superior equipment or brilliant tactics. They survived because when everything else failed, they simply refused to quit. In the end, that stubborn refusal to give up turned the bloodiest failure in American military history into the foundation of victory. If you want to hear more incredible survival stories from the deadliest battles in history, make sure to subscribe and check out our video about why 94% of flamethrower operators died on Iwo Jima. The stories you'll hear will change how you think about courage and survival in combat.